All right, guys. So we're going to talk about 3.3 main ideas. Title of this section is Call to Arms. So what does that kind of make you think about? Kind of makes you think that war is getting ready to happen. That's what's getting ready to happen here with the Revolutionary War. So call to arms. They're getting ready to fight. So first of all, they have a meeting in Philadelphia. In September 1774, the Continental Congress met in Philadelphia. Georgia was the only colony not there. Not sure as to why they weren't there. All we know is they weren't there. Delegates called for the repeal of 13 acts of Parliament, voted to boycott British trade, and endorsed the Suffolk results. So remember, repeal means to cancel, to end, no more. So they didn't want any more of the 13 acts or laws of Parliament, and they voted to boycott British trade. So boycott, remember, that is to completely not use or stay away from British trade. So they weren't going to trade with the British, and they endorsed or were for the Suffolk results. So then Patrick Henry, he's from Virginia, representative from Virginia at this meeting, urged unity against Britain and addressed the concept of thinking as Americans. So he wanted them to think as Americans, not as to so much as to what colony they're from, or not as British citizens. So American colonists use militias to protect their communities. So remember what militias are. Those are citizen soldiers who usually would arm themselves. Okay, on to Patrick Henry. In September 1774, as anger toward the British grew, 55 delegates from the colonies gathered in Philadelphia to form Continental Congress. The Continental Congress was a political body formed to challenge British control and stand up for the colonies. So I highlighted that there just to kind of give you a definition there of what the Continental Congress was. And so what they're there for is to represent all the colonies. There's a group of men that represent each colony. An outspoken representative from Virginia named Patrick Henry wanted to unite a strong front against the British. He gave them a rousing address on the second day of the meeting that helped to unite the delegates. So this rousing address he gave, you've probably heard of it. Most people know it as the "Give Me Liberty" or "Give Me Death" speech, which is what he gave at this meeting. A little excerpt he says from this speech is, "The distinctions between Virginians, Pennsylvanians, New Yorkers, and New Englanders are no more. I'm not a Virginian, but an American." So what he's saying there is that they don't need to think like they're from each of those colonies. They need to think like they are all from one nation. They are all American, not separated by these colonial lines that they've created. I've put a video on, or a link to a video on your Google Classroom to watch his speech and the transcript of it, so you guys can check that out after you watch these slides. So the fighting starts. The fighting begins. General Thomas Gage ordered British troops to go to Concord to seize and destroy ammunition that American militias had stored to fight Britain. So remember, we talked about militias, that they only had they had to supply their own ammunition. They had to supply their own weapons, usually muskets. So they started to realize, hey, the war looks inevitable. Most of them were patriots and were ready to fight anyways. So they started to store up some weapons and ammunition that they thought they may need for the war. So on April 18th, 1775, British soldiers marched out of Boston, and Americans Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Samuel Prescott rode to warn colonists that the British were coming. So with these, you guys have probably heard of Paul Revere's famous ride. Just to let you know, he wasn't alone. There were two other riders, William Dawes and Samuel Prescott. They rode to Lexington to warn everybody about what was happening, and then rode on to Concord. And on this ride, Paul Revere and William Dawes were actually captured by the British, but Samuel Prescott was able to ride ahead and keep riding to warn everybody else. So the Minutemen fought British at both Lexington and Concord, and Britain suffered heavy losses there. So at Lexington, you've heard about the shot heard around the world. Okay, more than likely you've heard about that. If you haven't, it was in a poem by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it was the first shot of the Revolutionary War. Nobody knows who shot it, which side it came from, where it came from, whether it was the British or the Americans. They just know there was a shot, and that's where they think, or that's where they say the Revolutionary War had began. So they fight them at Lexington, they fight them at Concord, and then they move on. The British, they're able to hold their own a little bit, and at Concord, the British did burn whatever weapons they did find. It wasn't a lot because the militiamen had moved most of them at the time. And Minutemen, remember, those are they're still part of the militia, but that's just what some of the militiamen called themselves because they bragged on themselves, saying they would be ready to fight in a moment's notice or a minute's notice. So as they kept going, they went to this place here. This is called the North Bridge. This is past Concord where they kept fighting. These people over here on the right are going to be your Minutemen and militia and the Patriots. This is the Redcoats or the British. Okay, so they fight at this old North Bridge. This is where they fought. This bridge, obviously, it's not the same bridge, but there is still this bridge in Massachusetts. If you're ever able to go up there and see it, it would be a pretty cool historical site because people actually fought for the Revolutionary War at this place. So as the British retreated and started heading back to Boston, the Patriots and militia were scattered along the road back to Boston and hiding in the bushes and in the trees and stuff. And whenever they would come by, the militia members would start shooting at the British. So they were kind of hiding in the trees and hiding in wait as they came by, and they would shoot them, and that they were able to kill more British soldiers as they tried to make it back to Boston, which is a smart idea because the militia and the Patriots, they knew this land, they knew the geography, they knew where they could hide. They've lived there for a while. And these British soldiers are not from there, and they don't really know the geography that well. And so they weren't expecting these surprise attacks. So now more military action. Benedict Arnold, you've probably heard about him. He was a patriot who fought for the British. He fought the British, not for the British, at Fort Ticonderoga. So Fort Ticonderoga, that is where that was a fort that the British controlled, and it was a very important fort for strategy, where they could. It was a good spot to have a fort. So Benedict Arnold had an idea to attack that fort, and then he teamed up with Samuel Adams and the Green Mountain Boys from Vermont, and they did a surprise attack on Fort Ticonderoga and controlled that fort for the Americans. Later, Benedict Arnold became a traitor because he was selling military information to Britain. So he totally flipped teams. All right, that's what being a traitor. I highlighted that one for you. So he went and is now a hang on. Hello. Okay, I'll do it on my computer. Thank you. Okay, maybe you guys are still with me. So, traitor selling military information to Britain on June 16, 1775, the American militia set up posts on Bunker Hill and Breed's Hill and held ground, causing heavy British casualties until running out of gunpowder and withdrawing. So, this was called the Battle of Bunker's Hill. Even though the majority of the fighting took place on Breed's Hill, the name of the battle is Bunker Hill. So they knew going into this that they didn't have a lot of ammunition. So what they did is they decided to wait. One of the generals told them to wait until you see the whites of their eyes before you fire. Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. So they're at the top of Breeds Hill, and as the British are coming up the hill, they wait till they literally can see the whites of their eyes before they start shooting them, not to waste any ammunition. So they hold them off for a while, but then the British get too close and or not get too close. They run out of gunpowder. They run out of ammunition. So the colonists, the patriots, had to retreat. So some colonists were loyalists, meaning they sided with Britain. Other colonists were patriots, meaning that they supported American independence. I threw that in there for you guys. Just another way to see those vocab words that you'll have on the vocab test coming up. So that is all from this section, this lesson. I know there's kind of a lot thrown in there real quick with not a whole lot of detail about it, but this should give you an idea of kind of how the Revolutionary War started and a couple of the first battles that really were turning points and major points of the Revolutionary War. Okay. Again, if you guys have any questions, shoot me an email, whatever, message me, and I'll try to answer those. If you need to come and talk to me, feel free to do so, and we'll talk about any of these things you have today. Okay, so there's some other videos for you to watch today, and so the 3.3 guided reading activity is your assignment.